It's the end of January, which means it is time for our first reading wrap up of the year. If you're new here, my name is Charlotte. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm so excited to have you, and let's just jump straight into things. So I read 9 books in January, so it was a fairly good reading month, and I also DNF'd 1 book. So we'll talk about them all. We'll talk about the book I DNF'd and why I DNF'd it. A lot of these books have been in reading vlog videos as well, so I will tag all of the videos that they are in as I'm talking about the books, in case you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts, because we will keep this fairly brief just so it isn't too long. But let's just dive straight into things. So I'm gonna go in order of like that I read the books in. I always think that's the best way to go for these. So I kicked the year off by reading the Atlas 6 trilogy. So I actually read the first one on, well, I read the first 2 on Kindle. The first one is on Kindle Unlimited, so I read it on there, and then I went on Vinted and I got the hardback. But I got this for like £3, like it was a really good price. So definitely, like, there was quite a few as well, so check Vinted for hardbacks if you do want the hardbacks of this series, because like obviously the 3rd one is only out on hardback, so little hack for you all there. But yeah, so this was the first book that I read this month. I'm just trying to find my rating because I can't remember. Okay, so I gave this book 5 stars. This is about 6 magicians, although when we say magicians, it's not like a magician as in like a kid's party. Like they have magic powers. Like some of them can like read minds, others have like physics as their powers, so they can, like, I don't really know how to describe it, but they can do like some crazy like quantum physics basically, like just with them, I don't know, with their powers. It's crazy. It is crazy. So they get invited to join the Alexandrian Society, but only 5 of the 6 can make it past the first year. And in the first book, we go through the first year with them. The first book is all about the first year, and this one is very centered around dark academia. It is the main kind of focus, the main vibe of the book, and it's super interesting. I would definitely recommend these. The language that Olivia Blake uses is quite, people say it's pretentious, so she uses a lot of big words. There's definitely like a few kind of sentences and quotes that you can tell are made to be quotable, so if that's not your vibe, maybe avoid these. But I really enjoyed them. They are also set in the modern world, and it's the first time I've read a fantasy that is set in the modern world and not kind of like a mythical world, so I thought that was really interesting, because it's almost like they are set in like an alternative Earth, which was just really cool. We then went into the Atlas Paradox, the 2nd book in the series. Again, I read this on Kindle and also on audiobook. Like, I was really obsessed with the series by this book. Like, I did not want to put it down. I did not want to be away from these characters. So I ended up getting the audiobook on Audible. I got like a free sample, so I got like 2 free tokens, which was so good for this series. So yeah, I did really enjoy this one. I obviously can't kind of dive more into what happens, but this really dives into kind of dream realms and that side of things. It was really good. I again really enjoyed this one, and I did give this 5 stars again. And then we come to the 3rd and final book in the series. Again, I obviously can't really talk too much about this without giving like everything away, but what I will say is this was a bit disappointing for me. It was a little bit of a letdown. There were some big plot holes, or there was plots that were explored in the Atlas Paradox that just never got mentioned in this. And it was quite anticlimactic, some things that they've been building up to kind of for all 3 books. When it happened, it was a bit like, oh, like they didn't really spend much time on it. So it was quite anticlimactic, but obviously 4 stars is still a pretty good rating. And I do always find that like with the final book in a series, it is either like a 6-star read or like a 4-star read. Like, there isn't really like an in-between. I think with the final book in a series, it is really hard to do what everyone wants. Again, I did listen to the audiobook of this whilst reading it, which was really good and definitely like aided my reading experience. And I did also, oh, it's slipping out of its cover, I also tabbed this one. I haven't gone through and tabbed the others from my Kindle tabs yet, but this one where I read the physical copy, I was able to do that, and it's a signed copy, which we always love to see. Okay, so after reading the Atlas trilogy, I needed a filler book, like, because I knew the next book that I was going to read after them was Little Women, and I knew I needed something to to fill the gap. So I read Evidence of the Affair by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a short story that is like an Amazon exclusive short story that she did, and it is fantastic. I would really recommend it. It isn't about celebrities, but it is set in the same universe. It's set in the Mick River universe. If you have read Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six, Carrie Soto is Back, or Evelyn Hugo, you will know that they are set in, I like to refer to it as the Mick River universe. Mick River is mentioned in the book. He isn't an actual character, but he is, like, his music is mentioned in the book. So we are in that timeline. We're in the same timeline as all of those other books, which is really fun. It was a nice way to return to that kind of story and that timeline without being like too in it. And the short story is completely told through letters. So you are reading the letters that are sent from, like, basically it's like a woman and a man, and their partners are both having an affair with each other, and they decide to, well, the woman reaches out to the man to talk about it, and we read their letters. The letters span over a year, and it's so good. There is a crazy twist at the end, and yeah, it's definitely a really good short story. If you're looking for like a palate cleanser, I would really recommend. I read it in like an hour. It was super gripping because you kind of just wanted to find out what happened, and I also was like really curious to find out if it was ever going to stop being letters and we were going to kind of get more interaction. But yeah, it's definitely one of the like the favorite books that I have read, like especially for a short story. Like I felt really emotionally connected to the characters. I cried whilst reading it, like, which is just insane when I didn't get any dialogue, any kind of, like, I wasn't in their POV. It was all completely like letters. For me to feel that attached to the characters is just, it really shows like her superb writing. And I did give Evidence of the Affair 4 stars. This then brings us on to Little Women. So this was the first classic that I read this year. One of my goals for the year is to read a classic, or just read more classics. I kind of want to read a classic a month, but we'll see how that goes. This was my first time reading Little Women, and I hadn't watched the film as well when I read the book. So I did do a vlog where I read the book and then watched the film, and then kind of spoke about how the two differed and what I liked about the differences and liked about the similarities. So if you're really interested in my thoughts on this, check that out. But this was a 3.5 star read for me. There were just some things that really lacked in terms of like the character arches for me. It didn't feel like the character arches made sense. However, I understand that the reason the characters arches didn't make sense to me is because I am reading this in 2024. We are living in a really different world to when it was written, and the characters' arches probably make a lot of sense for the time, and that is something that you always need to take into consideration when you are reading a classic. And it can be really difficult to do, and it obviously did shape my opinion of the book, but overall I did enjoy it. Like, I have got a fair amount of tabs in there, which I think always shows like how much you're enjoying a book. But yeah, it was just a 3.5 stars for me. It's not really a book that I've thought about massively since. I thought about the film more than I thought about the book. I really like, mainly because I just really like the cinematography and stuff of the film. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this as a classic if you are wanting to get into classics. I think it's more interesting and almost more relatable than something like Sense and Sensibility, for example. That's another classic that I've read, but it isn't as good of a classic in my opinion as like The Catcher in the Rye, which is like one of my all-time favourite books. So yeah, just like a middle of the run 3.5 stars for me. Following on from that, I went into my week of reading Litfic, which I kicked off with Normal People by Sally Rooney. I absolutely adored this book. Like, this has definitely become like a favourite book of mine. Like, look at all of these tabs, like, yeah. And it definitely, like, there could have been so many more tabs. Like, it's not, like, I just loved this book so much. It was such a relatable read. It felt so cathartic reading it. Like, I really enjoyed this. This is about Connor and Marianne, who kind of grew up in the same small town. They kind of have more conversations by the time, like, their last year of school, and then they end up at the same university. And the book is basically exploring their relationship throughout different settings, how it changes over time. I think we go over like a 3-4 year time period. Like, it's quite a long time period. The chapters are pretty long, and they're all just kind of called like 6 weeks later. Like, you don't really have like chapter 1, they're just like 6 weeks later, 4 months later, like, and then the date. So it's really interesting in that respect, and also the relationship is super interesting. It's a really good kind of modern read. I think it really speaks to modern like situationships and all of those, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. Like I said, it's one of my favorite books that I have ever read, so I think this is a 6-star read for me, just because I loved it so much. Like a 5-star read feels wrong for how I feel about this book. I really want to watch the series, but I'm also scared to watch the series because I've seen more clips and like I know that they've added things in for the series and things, and I don't know, I just feel so attached to the book. But yeah, I adored this. I would definitely recommend this if you are someone that has been in like situationships before. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I think if you have been in this kind of situation where it is a situationship that's super on again, off again, you will love this book because you will really just relate to it. I read Conversations with Friends as well, and I definitely preferred this to Conversations with Friends. Like, it's so much more me. It's a lot less wacky than Conversations with Friends, so 10 out of 10. Definitely read this one. Next up, we were still in my week of reading litfic, and I actually read I read Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. This is a literary romance, so a little bit different. I did enjoy this book. So this is about Sally, who is a writer for SNL. Well, it's not called SNL in the book, but we can assume it is SNL. And the first half of the book is describing a week, like, where with a show, like there was a specific guest, so that we kind of get a little bit of romance through that, but most of it is her like kind of just info dumping about how SNL works and everything like that. So that is the main bulk of the book, and then it kind of leads into relationships. So the reason that she talks so much about SNL is because it's set behind the backdrop of the whole, remember like a few years ago where Pete Davidson started dating Ariana Grande, and it kind of like led to a bit of a spike of like pretty mid men dating like insane women, like Pete Davidson dating Ariana Grande. Like, he wasn't necessarily like the highest flying in his career at the time, he wasn't the most attractive, he wasn't like all of these things, whereas like Ariana Grande is like insanely attractive. She was at like the top of her game when they were dating. Like this whole thing of like women at the top of their careers in their respective field dating like mid men, basically. It's set behind that backdrop, and the narrator is exploring the idea and talking a lot about the idea and thinking about the idea, and she actually does a sketch where there's like a rule basically that it can't work the other way around. Like, a really successful man couldn't date a woman that isn't less successful than him. Like, we don't see it kind of replicated in that way, which is super interesting. So I really enjoyed that premise of the book. However, I didn't like the second kind of half where it became more of a romance, just because the two parts didn't feel very well gelled together. The middle of this book and the end of this book all takes place during COVID, so the whole middle section is kind of just a series of emails. So that's how the romance starts to form, I guess. And it is interesting in some ways, like just reading through the emails, going very in depth into that COVID side of things, but it wasn't the most like engaging book in that way. I don't know, I just didn't love the romance. Like, the romance part wasn't super well written in my opinion, but I really liked the start of it and exploring those ideas. So I did give this one 3.5 stars, just because it didn't do everything that I wanted it to do. And then we have my DNF of the month, which is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This is about a girl that basically has the plan that she wants to sleep for a year. Like, she obviously has mental health problems and that kind of thing, but she ends up doing a lot of drugs in order to be able to sleep for a year. Yeah, it's a little bit strange. It's a very wacky book, very wacky book, and I just couldn't get on board with it. I didn't enjoy the character. Like, the reason I DNF'd it was because I didn't like the character. I found her really rude. There's a bodega that she goes to like all of the time, and when she's talking about the people that work at the bodega, she just refers to them as the Egyptians. She doesn't like say they're the workers or anything. Like, anytime she refers to them, she just calls them the Egyptians, or if there's only one of them working there, the Egyptian. And I just didn't like that. Like, it just gave me an icky feeling. And just like a lot of the book, like she's really horrible to her best friend. Like her best friend checks on her, comes around to hers all the time to make sure she is okay, because like Miss Girl is doing so many drugs, like so many drugs, and her best friend comes around all the time to check on her. She always calls her to make sure like that she is, you know, alive. And the girl is just so mean about her, and the best friend starts to go through some like really hard stuff like in her personal life, and the narrator is just like mean and rude, and I couldn't get on board with it. I would say that the blurb doesn't sound like what actually happens in the book. So to me, so the blurb is saying young, thin, pretty, a recent Columbia graduate, an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan paid for by her inheritance. Our narrator has many of the advantages of life, but there is a vacuum at the heart of things, and it isn't just the loss of her parents, or the way her Wall Street boyfriend treats her, or her sadomasochistic relationship with her best friend. It's the year 2000 in the world's greatest city, a glitter of wealth and possibility. What could terribly be wrong? I was really thinking we were gonna get Serena van der Woodsen vibes from this. That's just my how the blurb sounded to me, and it's not that. If you think it's going to be like a fun book like that, it's not. This is not the book for you. So yeah, I couldn't get on board with this. It just wasn't for me. Okay, and then I went on to a book on my Kindle. This is a book that I got an advanced reader copy of, and for the next couple of books I do have a reading vlog coming of. So the next one I read, as I said, I got an advanced reader copy of this, an ARC, and it is A Collision of Stars, which is an independently published book by Georgia Stone, and it comes out on the 3rd of February, so literally like 3 days after you watch this video, or 3 days after I post this video. So yeah, A Collision of Stars. This book is incredible. I loved it so much. So it is about Ava and Finn. Ava is a barista at a coffee shop, and Finn is like, he works in marketing but doing contracts, so he's only in London for a really short space of time. He starts coming to the coffee shop and hanging out loads, and he kind of they start to form a bit of like a friendship just from seeing each other so much. And Finn has this bucket list of events that he like, all the things he wants to do in London, and Ava like has a roommate that is like, you need more friends, like you only have me as a friend, you need more. So Ava ends up basically forming a fake friendship with Finn so that she has someone to keep, like she has a friend though she can be like, yeah, I'm friends with Finn, like you don't need to worry about me, to her friend. And Finn has someone that he can go and do his bucket list with. So the book, we are following them on their journey of their fake friendship, the twists and turns. It is a romance. So, and basically we follow them doing the bucket list, and it's so cute. I absolutely adored this book. I laughed so much in the first half and cried so much in the second half. It made me feel everything. I feel so connected to these characters. I absolutely adored them. Like, it was amazing. So yeah, I think this was like a 5-star read for me. Like, it was just so good. So good. And then the final book that I've read in January is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I don't know how to describe this book because I couldn't tell you what it was about. It's very strange. So there is this thing called Caraval, which is like a play but a game. It's really weird, and there's so much about it that you don't find out until you're reading the book, because the whole idea is like it's a game but it's not a game. And I don't want to talk too much about what it's about because I will tell something that's a spoiler, but I really enjoyed this. This is kind of, it exists with the same almost world as the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. Like, you are meant to read these first because the characters of these books do appear in Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I didn't find that like my reading experience of this was overly affected by the fact that I hadn't read, like that I'd read it in the wrong order. But I did really enjoy this. It was really twisty and turny and very different, and it was really like, I just really like Stephanie Garber's writing, and this book really cemented to me that it is her writing that I like. It wasn't necessarily just the story of Once Upon a Broken Heart. So I found this super good, super interesting, and I would definitely recommend this one. But that is everything. Those are the 9 books with one DNF that I read in January. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you enjoyed them. Let me know your thoughts on the rest of the Caraval series, because I won't be reading it for a little while, and the way that book ended, I need immediately to read the next book. Another thing with this, Stephanie Garber is the queen of romance subplots. The way that she does a romance subplot is incredible. I love it. But that is everything from me. If you enjoyed this video, give this video a like and subscribe to my channel so that I know that you want to see more of this kind of content, and I will catch you on the next one for my February TBR so we can see what I'll be reading next month.